And joining me right now with insights on the party's new leadership and its immediate priorities is House Judiciary ranking member, soon to be the chairman of the Judiciary Committee and a member of the House Oversight Committee as well. Jim Jordan is here. Congressman, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for being here this weekend.
Good to, you bet. Good to be with you.
So we just heard Kevin McCarthy, some questions about whether or not he'll make it over the finish line, with Andy Biggs telling Fox that he doesn't have the votes. Who will be the Speaker of the House, and what are your expectations for the leadership coming up in the House?
Well, I think it'll be Kevin McCarthy. Look, I said all along that the guy who gets you to the Super Bowl gets to coach the game, and understand over the last two cycles, Republicans have picked up seats in the House. And of course, now we're in the majority, and we will get to chair the committees. We will get to do the work that the American people have elected us to do. I do think it's interesting, too. Remember just a couple years ago, Maria, when Democrats were saying that they were going to turn Texas blue? Well, Texas is red, Florida's really red, Ohio is red, and frankly, it looks like New York and California are getting a lot less blue, because those are the states that actually where we elected new people that put us in the majority. I think that's, no one seems to focus on that because we didn't quite do what we thought we were going to do overall in the election. But we still won the House, and let's come together and realize that whatever differences exist between the more moderate members in the House and conservative folks like you and I, they pale in comparison to the differences between Republicans and the radical left, which now runs the Democrat Party, which has given us the chaos and the craziness we've seen over the last 21 months.
Yeah, it's a lot of fires to put out, that's for sure. So you've talked about your priorities. You and James Comer gave a press conference on Thursday about the investigation into the Biden family and influence peddling. Tell me about that, and tell me what you're looking to get to.
Well, we're looking to get to the truth and the facts, and I think probably what happened this week was probably the first time the Washington Press Corps actually heard the facts about the Hunter Biden and the Biden family business operation. Probably the first time they actually had to report the facts, and probably the first time that they actually realized this wasn't a Russian disinformation operation. This was all true clear back in October of 2020 when the story first broke about the laptop. But for me, the overarching concern is the Justice Department that is political. And there's not a question about that. Now, we know that is the case. They're a political operation. We've learned that from whistleblowers. And the connection between the political nature of the Justice Department and this Hunter Biden story, I think, is a real concern, because we know the FBI was involved in going to Facebook in October of 2020 and telling Facebook to be on the lookout for Russian misinformation, disinformation. And they did that at the same time that these 51 former intel officials released that letter that said the Hunter Biden story has all the earmarks of Russian misinformation. So that linkage between the political nature of the FBI to this story and suppressing that and using that to throttle back that story so the American people couldn't get information, I think that is a big concern, because it fits in with this broader concern I have, which is a Justice Department that is not treating people equally under the law and operating in a political fashion.
Well, this is a really important point that you make, and you've done so much work in terms of investigating why they were going after soccer moms, why they were attacking ordinary citizens to basically call them insurrectionists and extremists just because parents wanted to know more about what their kids were learning. That is about CRT. All the way to January 6th, you know, that hearing this past week with Christopher Wray, I was struck by the fact that he could not answer the question about whether or not the FBI had confidential human sources dressed up as Trump supporters on January 6th at the Capitol.
Yeah, I think he probably could have answered the question. I think he just refused to answer the question, and for whatever reason. We have heard from numerous whistleblowers who've said the problems are at the highest level of the FBI, specifically the Washington field office. One whistleblower told us, in fact, that it was that at that level it was rotted at its core. Now think about that. It's an FBI agent coming to us as a whistleblower saying that about the agency he works for. It's that bad. But there was an individual, Timothy T-Bolt, a different whistleblower, went to Senator Grassley and said that Mr. T-Bolt was the guy who was involved in suppressing the Hunter Biden story in the fall of 2020. And then we've had other whistleblowers come tell us that it was this same man, Mr. T-Bolt, who was pressuring agents to classify, as you talked about, classify all these cases as domestic violent extremism cases to fit this broad narrative that Joe Biden and the Democrats have about how half the country are extremists. So that is what, when I talk about the political nature that just pervades the Justice Department now, it is there because we have heard from, I have never in my time in Congress seen so many agents come to us as whistleblowers. It's unprecedented what we have seen. And they did it while we're in the minority, knowing that we didn't really have the power to do much other than to begin to tell their story. But now we can really dig in and find out just how bad it is, because that is always the first step in stopping it, is to expose it and let the country see exactly what's been going on.
Well, it's very sad and disturbing what has taken place at the leadership of the FBI and the DOJ to see this kind of politicizing of really, arguably, our most important law enforcement agency. But let's zero in here on the Biden family business and this influence peddling investigation that you and James Comer will be continuing, because my worry is the fact that the Communist Party of China is inside the gates of America, and they have infiltrated this country in so many ways, from, honeypots to people like Eric Swalwell and other lawmakers in California, to, putting entrapment schemes in place. Congressman, what are you going to do to connect the dots that taking money from officials of adversarial countries is a national security threat?
Well, the first thing we need is actually access to the suspicious activity reports. These are reports that banks and financial institutions send to the Treasury Department when they see suspicious activity. The committee has only been able to see 2. We know there are 150, so we'd like to see the other 148. So I think that is step one. And it should tell us something, that the Biden administration has changed the policy. It used to be in previous administrations, whether it was with Bush, Obama, with President Trump, committees could have access to suspicious activity reports. But now, for the first time, the Biden administration has said, no, time out. So first of all, they won't comply with any requests we have for information that Mr. Comer has sent to the White House or to the folks involved in this. They won't comply with that, which is sort of kind of the norm, I guess, from many White Houses, is they're reluctant to comply with the opposing party asking for information. But then they changed the suspicious activity report process and protocols. That's never happened before.
That's right.
And now we learn they've set up a special group the Democrats have to go after people who are investigating this issue. So I think that's kind of sends a signal in and of itself that maybe there is something there. And we tried to point out a number of these facts at the press conference earlier this week.
We appreciate your time and your leadership on all of that. Thank you, sir.